hidden corners. The third-floor break room was deserted at 4 a.m., save for Olivia, who sat by the window, gazing at the city lights. Julian, still in his Mark disguise, hesitated at the doorway, struck by how the soft vending machine light highlighted her profile. "The mysterious maintenance man arrives," she said without turning. "I was beginning to think you'd collapse somewhere with a mop in your hand." Julian chuckled, easing into the chair across from her. "Nearly did. I've never appreciated cleaning staff enough until now." "No one does." Olivia pushed a cup toward him. "Colombian dark roast, properly brewed, not that instant stuff they stock downstairs." The coffee was heavenly compared to what he'd been drinking. "You weren't kidding about the good coffee." Small perks of knowing every corner of this building. She studied him with curious eyes. "So, Mark, what's your story?" Most people don't suddenly start cleaning office buildings in their 40s without a reason. Julian had prepared for this, needed a change. Technology consulting firm I worked for downsized. Figured physical work might be a good change from staring at screens. Consulting to custodial. Quite the career shift. Her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Life takes unexpected turns," he said, surprised by how true that felt. "What about you? Always wanted to be in security?" Olivia's expression softened. "Actually, I was pre-med once. Had to drop out when my brother Thomas got sick. Muscular dystrophy. Medical bills piled up after our parents passed." She traced the rim of her cup. "Security pays better than retail, has health benefits, and night shift comes with differential pay. Thomas needs round-the-clock care now." Julian felt a tightening in his chest. "That's a lot to handle alone." "You adapt. Thomas is brilliant, builds websites from his specialized computer setup. Between his freelance work and my job, we manage." She smiled, but Julian could see the exhaustion behind it. "The hardest part is dealing with Nexus's healthcare plan. They keep reducing coverage while the executives get premium packages." Julian nearly choked on his coffee. His HR department had assured him their healthcare plan was competitive. "That seems unfair." "That's corporate America for you," Olivia shrugged. "You know what's really ironic? I've never even seen Julian Reed in person, the CEO, and yet his decisions impact whether my brother gets his medication. Must be nice in that penthouse, never having to think about people like us." Each word struck Julian like a physical blow. He'd prided himself on creating a company that cared for its employees. "Maybe he doesn't know," Julian offered carefully. Olivia's laugh was bitter. "Please." "Nadia from accounting tried to arrange a meeting with leadership about benefits last year. Got shut down by middle management. They protect him from the uncomfortable realities." Over the next few nights, Julian found himself gravitating toward Olivia during breaks. She showed him shortcuts through the building, introduced him to the night staff. Hector, who'd worked maintenance for 20 years. Pauline, who cleaned executive floors while taking online classes. Darius, who managed the server room and hadn't had a raise in 3 years, despite systems upgrades doubling his workload. Each story added to Julian's growing discomfort. How had he become so disconnected from his own company? On his 5th night, he helped Olivia distribute supplies to the cleaning teams. They found themselves alone in the supply closet, surrounded by shelves of paper products and cleaning solutions. "You're different, Mark," she said suddenly, sorting through boxes of gloves. "Most new guys complain constantly. You just observe and ask questions." "I'm interested in how things really work," he answered honestly. "Well, since you're so interested," Olivia pulled him toward the door. "Let me show you something." She led him to a secluded executive conference room using her security pass to enter. Inside, projected on the wall, was a presentation left open on the computer. "Nexus Restructuring Plan, Confidential. Found this while doing my rounds. They forgot to log out." Olivia's face was grim as she pointed to a slide detailing department cuts. "They're planning to outsource maintenance and security to third-party contractors. Cheaper labor, no benefits. Everyone we work with will lose their jobs within 3 months." Julian stared at what was unmistakably his CFO's presentation template. He'd heard nothing about this plan. "The worst part?" Olivia continued. "They're announcing record profits next quarter. They don't need to cut. They're just increasing margins for shareholders. Julian felt sick. This can't be right. It's always right when it comes to money. Olivia's eyes glistened. Hector has grandkids to support. Pauline won't finish her degree without tuition assistance. And Thomas, her voice broke. I can't lose our health insurance. Without thinking, Julian reached for her hand. This won't happen, he promised recklessly. Olivia looked at their joined hands, then up at him with confusion and something else, a spark that mirrored his own growing feelings. How could you possibly stop it? Julian realized he'd spoken too passionately. I just mean, there must be something that can be done. Walking back to their stations, Olivia stopped suddenly. You know what I dream about, Mark? Not riches or fancy things, just security. Knowing tomorrow won't be worse than today. She looked at him with vulnerability he'd never seen in the corporate world. Sometimes I think that's all any of us really want. As Julian watched her walk away, guilt twisted through him like a knife. He was living a lie with someone who'd shown nothing but honesty. And worse, he was falling for her, even as the truth remained hidden between them like an invisible wall. That night, as Julian cleaned the CEO's office, his office, he stared at the photographs of himself accepting awards, shaking hands with dignitaries, smiling at charity galas. The man in those photos now felt like a stranger. Truth in Shadows. 2 weeks into his undercover assignment, Julian had established a rhythm. By day, he slept and remotely handled critical company decisions through Danielle. By night, he cleaned floors and learned more about Nexus technologies than any executive report had ever revealed. You missed a spot, Olivia teased, finding him polishing the glass wall of the innovation lab. Her unexpected appearance made his heart race, a reaction he was finding increasingly difficult to ignore. I thought security. Supervisors had better things to do than critique cleaning technique, he replied with a smile. I'm multitasking, securing the premises and saving you from Harvey's wrath. She handed him a proper microfiber cloth. Use this instead. Works better on fingerprints. Their hands brushed during the exchange, lingering a moment too long. The tension between them had been building, unspoken but unmistakable. Break in 10? She asked, already walking backward toward the elevator. Wouldn't miss it. Julian had begun to live for these moments, stolen conversations in empty break rooms, walking rounds together through silent corridors, learning about Olivia's dreams and struggles. She'd told him about her plans to eventually return to medical school, how she read medical journals during quiet shifts to stay connected to her former path, how Thomas's condition had stabilized but required expensive treatments not fully covered by insurance. Meanwhile, Julian was discovering disturbing patterns throughout his company. Departments were siloed, middle management filtered information, and executive decisions were made with alarming disconnection from ground-level realities. That night, Olivia brought sandwiches she'd made at home. Nothing fancy, she said, unwrapping them at their usual table. But better than vending machine dinner. Julian took a bite, overwhelmed by the simple kindness. When was the last time someone had made him food without being paid to do so? My compliments to the chef, he said sincerely. Olivia smiled, then grew serious. I've been meaning to ask you something. Julian tensed. Had she discovered his identity? The maintenance contract bidding opens next week, she continued. Will you apply to stay with the new company? Most of us are updating resumes, but... Relief flooded him, followed immediately by shame. While his employees worried about their livelihoods, he was playing a role. I'm not sure yet, he answered carefully. Olivia nodded, disappointment visible. I understand. Everyone needs to look out for themselves. That's not what I meant, Julian said quickly. There are complications, aren't there always? She met his eyes. Mark, I don't usually do this, but there's something between us, isn't there? I'm not imagining it? The directness took his breath away. You're not imagining it. She reached across the table, fingers intertwining with his. Then come to dinner tomorrow. Meet Thomas. It's his birthday, and he's tired of hearing about the mysterious maintenance man who makes his sister smile. Julian knew he should refuse. The deception had gone too far already. Yet looking at Olivia, the woman who'd unknowingly transformed his Perspective on everything, he couldn't say no. I'd be honored. The following evening, found Julian standing outside a modest apartment building, clutching a gift-wrapped book on web development and a bouquet of flowers. He'd nearly called Danielle to cancel the charade a dozen times. Instead, he'd spent the day reviewing every personnel policy at Nexus, examining healthcare plans, and drafting sweeping changes he intended to implement. Immediately, Olivia opened the door wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater. Instead of her uniform, a sight that made Julian momentarily forget his ethical dilemma. "You came," she said. "Relief evident," I said I would. Thomas's wheelchair was positioned near the window, where a computer setup dominated one wall. He had Olivia's eyes and quick smile, though his frame was thin and his movements limited. "So you're the night crawler who's got my sister checking her phone every 5 minutes?" Thomas said with a mischievous grin that made Olivia blush. Dinner was simple, homemade pasta and conversation that flowed effortlessly. Julian found himself sharing stories from his college days, carefully edited to remove references to his entrepreneurial beginnings. Thomas showed him the websites he designed, displaying remarkable talent despite physical limitations. "You should see some of the corporate sites I've fixed," Thomas said, including sections of Nexus Technologies' internal portals. Their accessibility compliance was atrocious. Julian nearly choked on his wine. "You work for Nexus?" "Freelance," Thomas clarified. Their main developer reached out when they needed ADA compliance updates. Ironic, considering their employee benefits barely cover my treatments. Later, after Thomas had retired to his room, Olivia and Julian stood washing dishes side by side. A domestic scene so far removed from his usual existence that it felt like stepping into another life. "Thank you for coming," Olivia said softly. "It means a lot to him. To me." Julian set down the plate he was drying. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you." She turned, water dripping from her hands, face open and trusting. The words died in his throat. How could he destroy this connection with the truth? "What is it?" she prompted. Instead of answering, he leaned forward, kissing her gently. She responded immediately, hands still wet as they found his shoulders. The kiss deepened, weighted with emotions neither had fully expressed. When they separated, Olivia's expression was a mixture of happiness and hesitation. "I don't make a habit of falling for co-workers," she whispered. "Neither do I," Julian replied, the irony crushing him. As he left her apartment that night, Julian made a decision. The company-wide meeting was scheduled for Monday, originally planned to announce the outsourcing. Instead, it would become something entirely different. His deception would end regardless of the consequences. What he hadn't anticipated was that the truth would emerge before he was ready to reveal it. The revelation. The text from Olivia came at dawn. "Emergency at Nexus. All security and maintenance staff called in. Meeting in main auditorium at 9 a.m. Julian stared at his phone in confusion. He hadn't authorized any emergency meeting. Something was wrong. He arrived at Nexus headquarters through the main entrance for the first time in weeks, dressed in his CEO attire but keeping his now familiar cap pulled low. The lobby buzzed with tension as employees from all departments streamed toward the auditorium. Julian spotted Olivia near the security desk. Still in her night shift uniform, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept. Their gazes met across the crowded space, hers widening in surprise at his business attire. He started toward her, but the crowd pushed him forward into the auditorium. Inside, executives filled the stage with his CFO, Brandon Weiss, at the podium. Julian slipped into a back row, keeping his head down. Whatever was happening, he needed to understand before revealing himself. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Brandon began. "As some of you may have heard, there have been unauthorized access incidents to confidential company information." Murmurs spread through the room. Julian tensed. "Last night, our systems detected someone accessing executive presentation files and financial projections using security credentials during off hours. The same credentials were used to enter restricted areas multiple times over the past 2 weeks." Julian's stomach dropped. They were talking about Olivia showing him the outsourcing plans. "We've identified the security breach," Brandon continued. and have determined it was part of a coordinated effort to undermine the company's restructuring initiatives. The doors at the back of the auditorium opened, and Julian turned to see Olivia being escorted in by two security officers he didn't recognize. Her face was pale but defiant. "Ms. Torres has been suspended pending an investigation," Brandon announced. "We have reason to believe she accessed confidential information and shared it with outside parties." Julian stood abruptly. "That's enough." Heads turned. A path cleared as he strode toward the stage, removing his cap. Gasps and whispers followed him. On stage, the executives froze in confusion. "Julian?" Brandon stuttered. "What are you— Release Ms. Torres immediately," Julian commanded, taking the podium. "She's done nothing wrong." The auditorium had fallen completely silent. Julian found Olivia's eyes in the crowd, watching as recognition dawned on her face, followed by hurt and betrayal so profound it physically pained him to witness. "For those who don't know me, I'm Julian Reed," he addressed the room, though his words were really for one person. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been working undercover as a maintenance worker named Mark." The revelation sent shockwaves through the audience. Olivia's expression hardened, her body rigid with tension. "I did this because I suspected there were things happening in my company that weren't reaching my desk. I was right." Julian fixed his executive team with a stern look. "Plans were being made that I never approved. Decisions affecting hundreds of lives were being implemented without proper oversight." He turned back to the employees. "What I discovered was far worse than operational inefficiencies. I found a company that had lost its soul." "My company." Julian gestured toward Olivia. "Ms. Torres didn't breach security protocols to undermine this company. She showed a fellow employee evidence of plans that would have devastated the livelihoods of dozens of families, plans made without my knowledge or approval." The executive team shifted uncomfortably. Brandon attempted to speak, but Julian silenced him with a raised hand. "Effective immediately, all restructuring plans are canceled. There will be no outsourcing of maintenance or security. Instead, we will be conducting a comprehensive review of our benefits packages, starting with healthcare." Julian stepped away from the podium, approaching Olivia directly. The security officers backed away uncertainly. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice now carrying only to those nearest them. "I deceived you, and there's no excuse for that." Olivia's voice was barely audible. "Everything was a lie." "Not everything," Julian insisted. "Not what matters." She shook her head, tears threatening. "How could anything be real when you were playing a role the entire time?" Before he could respond, she turned and walked out of the auditorium, dignity intact despite the eyes following her exit. Julian returned to the podium. "This meeting is adjourned. Executive team, my office now. Everyone else, take the day with pay. Changes are coming to Nexus Technologies, and they start today." Hours later, after a blistering confrontation with his leadership team and the initiation of a company-wide audit, Julian found himself outside Olivia's apartment building. His calls had gone unanswered, text messages unread. He buzzed her apartment with no response. Then, unexpectedly, Thomas's voice came through the intercom. "She doesn't want to see you." "I understand," Julian replied. "But I need her to hear something, please." A long pause followed. 2 minutes, Thomas finally said, buzzing him in. Julian found Thomas alone in the apartment. The web development book Julian had brought now open on his desk. "She's been crying," Thomas said without preamble. "First time since our parents died. The accusation struck deeper than anger would have. I never meant to hurt her." Interesting how people with power always say that after they've done exactly that. Thomas's gaze was unflinching. "Why are you here, Mr. Reed?" "To make things right. Starting with this?" Julian placed an envelope on the table. "New healthcare coverage for all Nexus employees effective immediately. Full coverage for pre-existing conditions, specialized treatments, medical equipment. No exceptions." Thomas opened the envelope, scanning the documents with professional scrutiny. "You could have implemented this any time." "Why now?" "Because I didn't understand until now," Julian admitted. "I needed to see through different eyes." "Her eyes," Thomas clarified. "Yes." Thomas considered him thoughtfully. "She's at Riverside Park, the bench overlooking the water. She goes there to think." Julian nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Mr. Reed? Thomas called as Julian reached the door. My sister believed in Mark. If any part of him was real, prove it with actions, not just apologies. The facade. Julian Reed stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the man looking back at him. His normally sleek dark hair was now hidden under a worn baseball cap, designer clothes replaced with faded blue coveralls, and 3 days of stubble darkened his jawline. The transformation from polished CEO to maintenance worker was nearly complete. This is ridiculous, he muttered, adjusting the name tag that read Mark. At 41, Julian had built Nexus Technologies from a startup in his garage to a company worth billions. Yet here he was, about to masquerade as a night maintenance worker in his own headquarters. The idea had come to him last week during the quarterly review. He'd overheard 2 executives in the hallway. Reed doesn't need to know about the layoffs yet. Let's just make the numbers work. The conversation had stopped him cold. What else didn't he know? The thought had gnawed at him for days until he'd devised this unorthodox plan. His assistant, Danielle, was the only person who knew. Are you sure about this? She asked, handing him a thermos of coffee. The board would have a fit if they knew. That's precisely why they can't know, Julian replied, shouldering a worn backpack. Something's happening in my company, Danny. I need to see it from the ground floor. The service elevator hummed as it descended to the basement level where the maintenance department operated. Julian had memorized the schedule. Midnight to 8 a.m., minimal interaction with daytime employees, perfect for remaining unnoticed. The maintenance office was a stark contrast to his penthouse suite. Fluorescent lights flickering above cluttered desks and lockers that had seen better days. A heavy-set man with graying temples looked up from a clipboard. You must be Mark, he said, extending a calloused hand. I'm Harvey, head of maintenance. Not gonna lie, we're short-staffed and behind schedule, so hope you're ready to work. Julian nodded, trying to adopt the demeanor of someone who needed this job. Ready to start, sir, Harvey snorted. Drop the sir stuff. Around here, we're all just trying to keep this place from falling apart while the suits upstairs count their money. The casual resentment in Harvey's voice made Julian wince internally. Was this how his employees viewed leadership? His first night was a crash course in humility. Julian cleaned bathrooms, emptied countless trash bins, and mopped corridors that seemed endless. By 3 a.m., muscles he didn't know existed were screaming in protest. First night's always the worst, came a voice behind him. Julian turned to see a woman watching him with amused brown eyes. She wore a security uniform, curly hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and carried herself with quiet confidence. I'm Olivia Torres, night security supervisor, she said. You look like you could use this. She offered him a bottle of water. Mark, he replied, accepting it gratefully. And yes, I'm discovering muscles I never knew I had. She laughed, the sound warm in the empty hallway. The executives who work here probably couldn't last an hour doing what you do. They walk past us like we're invisible. Julian took a long drink, hiding his discomfort. You've worked here long? 5 years, she said, leaning against the wall. Long enough to know this place inside out. The cleaning crew sees everything, but security hears everything. She tapped her temple. The stories I could tell you about Nexus would curl your hair. I'd like to hear them sometime, Julian said, surprised to find he meant it. Olivia checked her watch. I need to do my rounds, but the break room on 3rd has the good coffee, not the watered-down stuff they give maintenance. Stop by around 4 if you want to prevent complete exhaustion. As she walked away, Julian felt an unexpected flutter of interest. For the first time in years, someone was seeing him. Not his wealth, not his position, just him. He returned to mopping, his thoughts troubled. 1 night in, and already he was questioning everything about the company he'd built. What other truths were hiding in plain sight? And what would Olivia think if she knew who he really was? The facade had begun. Now Julian had to see just how deep the cracks in his company really went.